Hello and welcome to Indus News. Live from Islamabad, I'm Naila Shuja and these are the headlines. Four Pakistani soldiers have been martyred in a terrorist attack from across Afghanistan during a border fencing activity in Balochistan. Pakistan's military media wing says 6 others were injured in the attack. The ISPR says Pakistani troops responded promptly to the attack in GOVT district. India has reported a record of nearly 3,800 deaths from COVID-19 and more than 382,000 cases in a day. Meanwhile, India's entire delegation to a G7 foreign ministers meeting in London is self-isolating after 2 members tested positive. In Pakistan, 119 people lost their lives to the virus, while more than 4,100 people tested positive overnight. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 3.2 million lives as the number of infections approaches 154 million. At least 1 person has been killed and 6 others are wounded in Israeli air raids in northwest Syria. Syrian army says its air defenses intercepted several Israeli missiles over the Mediterranean port city of Latakia. Earlier, Syrian state media reported the Israeli attack also hit the town of Haifa near Latakia and Mesef in Hama province. Myanmar's national unity government, set up by opponents of army rule, says it has formed a defense force. In a statement, the shadow government said the move aims to protect its supporters from military attacks. Meanwhile, Myanmar's ambassador to the United Nations, Kya Mu-tun, has called for more U.S. sanctions on the junta. And in football, Manchester City have reached the final of the Champions League for the first time by beating Paris Saint-Germain 2-0 in the semi-final. Riyad Mahrez struck twice to secure City's 4-1 aggregate win at the Etihad Stadium. Pep Guardiola's side will now face either Chelsea or Real Madrid in the final on the 29th of May in Istanbul. For more news and details, stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back. 4 Pakistani soldiers have been martyred in a terrorist attack from across Afghanistan during a border fencing activity in Balochistan. Pakistan's military media wing said 6 others were injured in the attack. The ISPR said Pakistani troops responded promptly to the attack in GOVT district. The martyrs include Noor Zaman, Shakil Abbas, Ehsanullah, and Nek Sultan. For more on this, we are joined by Lieutenant General Moinuddin Haider, retired from Karachi. Sir, thank you so much for your time. Now, today's terrorists from Afghanistan attacked Pakistan's army in Balochistan and martyred 4 soldiers. Why is the Kabul administration not doing enough to stop these cross-border terror attacks?
This is most unfortunate what has happened, because these days as American troops are pulling out of Afghanistan, there is a lot of trouble within Afghanistan. There are many attacks taking place and there is turmoil. And in this turmoil now to start a new thing on Pak-Afghan border, where our troops are enacting that construction of that fence, which is good for security of both countries. But it seems that Afghan government itself is not taking strong action, nor their intelligence agencies, to prevent this. Because in spite of the fact that Durand Line problem is resolved, as far as we are concerned legally, from every point of view, 100 years have passed on that, and that is a de facto and de jure border. But at the same time, they want to have free, crossing places everywhere, which they have been used to for a long time.
Mr. Heather, is today's attack an attempt to sabotage already the crisis-hit Afghan peace process?
No, Afghan peace talk has nothing to do with this. And Afghan peace talks are not going forward very smoothly because Taliban are saying that you did not respect the May deadline. And for that reason, you see, they have started attacking government forces in Afghanistan, which is a lot of bloodshed is taking place. And I foresee a lot of bloodshed because I think they're used to this, and Taliban want to have whole share of the government, and the offer by their president to share power has been rejected by them. So I think a lot of trouble seems to be coming in Afghanistan.
Now, General, Pakistan has been warning the international community regarding spoilers. Who gains from such attacks?
Obviously, I mean, there are people who are behind these fellows, they may be faction of Taliban or they may be Pakistani Taliban who have been pushed from our tribal areas, erstwhile tribal areas into Afghanistan. And obviously somebody is funding them and somebody is telling them to take these targets. And we are quite sure India is certainly one of them, and there may be also others who want to destabilize Pakistan. So this border attack is very tragic. And also yesterday, this between the DGMOs, truce had taken place on the ceasefire line, on the line of control. But yesterday in Charbagh sector, there was again unprovoked firing by India. So I am not sure whether there is a linkage between these two, but these are disturbing facts for Pakistan.
General Moinuddin Heather, thank you so much for speaking to Indus News. Now moving on, in Afghanistan, health workers have been targeted in a car bomb that exploded near the bus in Kabul. Officials say at least one person has been killed while 3 others are injured. They said the health workers were heading to their office in the central province of Panjshir. No group has claimed responsibility for the blast so far. The violence surges Afghanistan as foreign forces begin withdrawing from the country. The United States says it has completed 2 to 6% of its troops withdrawal from Afghanistan. U.S. Central Command said an equivalent of 60 cargo planes of material has so far been removed ahead of the September deadline. In a statement, the CENTCOM said it has also transferred a facility in the southern Helmand province to the Afghan army. The command said it has sent more than 1,300 pieces of equipment for destruction. The U.S. military says it will provide weekly updates on the progress of the withdrawal. President Joe Biden has announced America's complete pullout by September this year. Iran says there are still a number of differences between Tehran and Washington at the nuclear deal revival talks in Vienna. In a media briefing, Foreign Ministry spokesperson dismissed the notion that the U.S. is insisting on keeping the sanctions intact. Saeed Khatibzadeh said that if that was the case, Iran would have pulled out of the negotiations by now. Khatibzadeh said remarks come after a day and he announced the finalization of 2 draft documents addressing sanctions removal and Iran's nuclear activities. Pakistan has recorded another 119 deaths from COVID-19 in the past 24 hours. The health ministry says the nationwide death toll has risen to 18,429. The ministry said out of nearly 45,000 tests conducted overnight, just above 4,100 came out positive. It said the positivity ratio has risen to 9.17%. The caseload has topped 841,000, out of which over 738,000 have recovered. The ministry said there are over 84,000 active cases in the country. Meanwhile, Planning Minister Asad Umar says the number of vaccinations in one day crossed the 200,000 mark. In a tweet, he urged those above 40 years to register urgently and others to adhere to the SOPs. India has reported a record of nearly 3,800 deaths from COVID-19 and more than 382,000 cases in a day. Meanwhile, India's entire delegation to a G7 foreign ministers meeting in London is self-isolating after 2 members tested positive. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 3.2 million lives as the number of infections approaches 154 million. More in this report.
As coronavirus crisis continues to ravage India, a court has ruled that deaths of COVID-19 patients due to lack of oxygen is a criminal act and not less than a genocide. The country's plans to administer jabs to all adults have been hampered by severe vaccine shortages. Experts are criticizing the government for a lack of preparedness in the fight against the virus that has claimed nearly 40,000 lives in April alone.
It's a spiral of preparedness, readiness, response, recovery, preparedness, readiness, response, recovery. It's a whole cycle. You don't stop, especially if we have seen that the virus is changing.
Over in the Americas, Brazil's former health minister told a Senate inquiry that President Jair Bolsonaro's government was aware that it was prescribing chloroquine to COVID-19 patients without any scientific evidence. Meanwhile, in Canada, Alberta province has reported its first death of a patient from a rare blood clot condition after receiving the AstraZeneca vaccine. Last month, the province of Quebec reported Canada's first death after the Oxford vaccine. In the US, the number of reported infections has dropped to its lowest point in 7 months. President Joe Biden has set a new vaccination goal to deliver at least 1 dose to 70% of adult Americans by July 4.
Our goal by July 4th is to have 70% of adult Americans with at least 1 shot and 160 million Americans fully vaccinated. That means giving close to 100 million shots, some first shots, others second shots, over the next 60 days.
President Biden also said the U.S. will send 60 million doses from its AstraZeneca vaccine stockpile to other nations by July 4. This comes as the United Kingdom's Prime Minister and U.S. Secretary of State agreed on the need for a global rollout of vaccines to end the pandemic. U.S. Trade Chief Catherine Tai also said the economic recovery depends on addressing global vaccine inequity.
At least 1 person has been killed and 6 others are wounded in an Israeli air raid in northwestern Syria. Syrian army says its air defenses intercepted several Israeli missiles over the Mediterranean port city of Latakia. It said the strike also caused damage to a civilian plastic manufacturing facility. Earlier, Syrian state media reported the Israeli attack also hit the town of Haifa near Latakia and Mayasif in Hama province. The attack also struck near a Russian airbase. 2 weeks ago, Israel accused Damascus of firing a missile that struck deep inside Israeli territory. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's mandate to form a new government following an inconclusive election has expired. In a statement, the presidency said Netanyahu has returned the mandate to President Reuven Rivlin. Now, the president can formally ask another political leader to try to assemble a coalition government within 28 days. The next candidate is widely expected to be Yair Lapid, whose party placed second to Netanyahu's Likud in the March vote. If the new nominee fails, the president can ask Parliament to agree on a candidate within 3 weeks. And if the Parliament cannot agree, the country would go to the polls for the 5th time in about 2 years. Israeli forces have clashed with Palestinians in Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood in occupied Jerusalem. The occupation troops also arrested 3 Palestinians, including a woman. Eyewitnesses said Israeli soldiers attacked 2 men and pushed them to the ground before cuffing them. They said the soldiers invaded the neighborhood and attacked dozens of residents who were peacefully protesting against the illegal Israeli settlements. Meanwhile, Hamas armed wing warned Israel against attacks on Palestinian residents in occupied East Jerusalem. Egypt and Turkey are set to hold exploratory discussions today to review to be normalized of the bilateral ties. In a statement, the Egyptian Foreign Ministry said political consultations will be held on the 5th and 6th in Cairo. It said the two sides will be focusing on the necessary steps that may lead to the normalization of ties in bilateral and regional contexts. Ankara and Cairo have been at odds since Egypt's army toppled President Mohamed Morsi in an ally of Turkey in 2013. Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu announced the opening of the first diplomatic channel with Egypt on the 15th of April. It's now time for a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. The United States says a strategic clarity on Taiwan policy carries significant downsides. This is the first time Washington has appeared reluctant to express its willingness to defend Taiwan in the event of a Chinese attack. Speaking at an event, U.S. Policy Coordinator for Indo-Pacific Kurt Campbell said it is appropriate to be considered the situation. Campbell said maintaining some degree of status quo over Taiwan is in the best interest of both and the U.S. and China. He said any conflict between Washington and Beijing over the issue will not be contained to a small geographic area. The official added it will quickly broaden and trash the global economy beyond anyone's prediction. The U.S. says the West needs to press Russia to honor its international commitments and obligations. Russia denies allegations that its actions are reckless, aggressive, or aimed against any country. In a tweet, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said Moscow must be held accountable for its actions. Separately, in an interview, he said the U.S. is not seeking to escalate tensions, but will respond to Russia's reckless and aggressive behavior. Blinken said an in-person meeting between Presidents Joe Biden and Vladimir Putin will benefit both countries. Washington's top diplomat noted the two sides can cooperate in areas where there is mutual interest. Myanmar's national unity government, set up by opponents of army rule, says that it has formed a defense force. In a statement, the shadow government said the move aims to protect its supporters from military attacks. Meanwhile, Myanmar's ambassador to the UN has called for more sanctions on the junta. Ambassador Ka Mi-tun told the U.S. Congress that Washington should target the state-run oil and gas company. In Myanmar's Mandalay and elsewhere, the pro-democracy supporters are staging an anti-regime protest. Teachers rallied in Monywa, pledging to continue their civil disobedience movement until democracy is restored. According to an activist group, at least 769 people have been killed in the crackdown on dissent so far. Bulgaria's President Rumen Radev has announced snap parliamentary elections on the 11th of July. He took the step after a third and final attempt to form a government following April 4 polls failed. Radev said that the dissolve the parliament and set up an interim government on the 11th of May. He said the expected appointment of a new electoral commission to be finalized by then. Prolonged political uncertainty could hamper the poorest EU member states' ability to restart its pandemic-battered economy. Former U.S. President Donald Trump has launched a communications website. It comes a day before Facebook's oversight board decides on Trump's indefinite suspension from the platform. The website, dubbed From the Desk of Donald J. Trump, will contain posts users can like and share to Facebook and Twitter. It is reportedly built by Campaign Nucleus, a digital services company created by a former Trump aide. Several posts on the site repeat debunked claims that last year's presidential election was rigged. Trump was permanently banned by Twitter and suspended by Facebook and YouTube after the January 6th Capitol riots. Today marks the 200th death anniversary of Napoleon Bonaparte, whom France celebrates for his wartime glories and brilliant statecraft. However, many in the country's overseas territories are remembering him for his pro-slavery acts instead. Details in this report. As France commemorates the anniversary of Napoleon Bonaparte's death today, Aurélie Ramassamy remembers a tyrant who reversed the abolition of slavery, rather than an emperor often celebrated for his battlefield triumphs. Like most Creoles on the Indian Ocean island of Réunion, one of France's overseas departments, Ramassamy is a descendant of slaves. In 1802, Napoleon restored slavery by decree in the French Caribbean and Réunion. Revolts were violently put down while white landowners and the empire got richer.
In no circumstances should Napoleon's image or persona be celebrated. However, it is important to highlight it, especially with regard to slavery, because it was him who had re-established slavery.
The 200th anniversary of Napoleon's death falls at a sensitive time when the global Black Lives Matter movement has resonated on French streets. Black historians say Napoleon's links to slavery remain unaddressed in the country, which still grapples with its colonial past and charges of deep-rooted racism.
The global resonance that Black Lives Matter had, for example, why does it resonate globally? It's not because it's imported from the US, it's because it resonates with some events that we have experienced, and as well as with the lack of knowledge of slavery and France's colonial past.
Scholars say the bicentenary is an occasion to start reshaping the myth that Napoleon was a national hero. Meanwhile, police brutality and racism in the past months has spurred demonstrations in France and its overseas territories. A high-altitude cleanup is underway in Bolivia's Valley of the Souls. Hundreds of volunteers aided by heavy machinery are clearing up the place, which has been hit hard by pollution. More in this report.
The Valley of the Souls, 30 minutes from the administrative capital, La Paz, in Bolivia's mountainous Andean region, is a major tourist attraction. But urban sprawl over years has left the picturesque spot littered with plastic waste and construction rubble. Now the rocky canyon is getting a cleanup as volunteers gather to shift over 15 tons of debris from the valley.
We are surprised and ask what is going on with the nature. It is a tourist place where many people come. The Valley of the Souls is a very special place, and many people have gathered here to be a voice for the nature and to get it the care and respect that it deserves. Rooting
through piles of garbage, volunteers said people needed to speak up more in defense of nature.
These cleanups are important, and we must continue with them because there is a great movement throughout the country. We have to continue until there is no place left that has garbage.
The valley is a protected area 3,965 meters above the sea level and cherished for its unusual geological formations.
European stocks are trading higher as investors digest a fresh round of corporate earnings and key economic data out of the Eurozone. Frankfurt's DAX is leading the gains, rising close to 1.5%. The Pan-European Stock 600, Italy's FTSE MIB, and London's FTSE have also added over 1%. Meanwhile, the CAC 40 in Paris has gained nearly 1%. Earlier Asian markets traded mixed with Hong Kong shares slipping, while Seoul's Kospi and Australia's ASX 200 edged up. European Union's Vice President Valdis Dombrovskis said that a diplomatic spat has jeopardized the ratification of a trade deal with China. In an interview, Dombrovskis said that the environment for the approval of the deal was not conducive. The deal went sour after the EU and China traded sanctions over Brussels' accusations regarding human rights violations. Dombrovskis said the EU had suspended political outreach with Beijing. A spokesperson for the EU said the investment deal could not be separated from the wider EU-China dynamic. The deal was a work of years for diplomats' efforts and would have allowed the EU and China to access each other's markets with lax regulations. In football, Manchester City have reached the final of the Champions League for the first time by beating Paris Saint-Germain 2-0. Riyad Mahrez struck twice to secure a 4-1 aggregate win for City at the Etihad Stadium. Mahrez fired the hosts into the lead in the 11th minute when he steered home from within the box. The winger secured City's place in the final in the 63rd minute when he turned in Phil Foden's cross. PSG sourly missed their talented striker Kylian Mbappe, who was left out because of a calf injury. Pep Guardiola's side will now either face Chelsea or Real Madrid in the final on the 29th of final in May in Istanbul. In National Basketball Association, Dallas Mavericks have beaten the host Miami Heat 127-113 to bag their 7th win in the past 9 games. Tim Hardaway Jr. led the way for the Mavericks with a career-high 1003 points as part of his 36 points. Luka Doncic registered 23 points, 12 rebounds, and 8 assists, while Jalen Brunson added 19 points. The defeat snapped Heat's 3-game winning streak. Meanwhile, Los Angeles Clippers overcame a 6-point deficit in the last 6 minutes to edge the Toronto Raptors 105-100. Paul George finished with 22 points and 9 rebounds to snap the Clippers' 3-game losing streak. In other contests, Milwaukee Bucks downed Brooklyn Nets 124-118 at home. Meanwhile, New Orleans Pelicans defeated the Golden State Warriors 108-103. The world's oldest person, a 118-year-old Japanese woman, has decided not to take part in the torch relay for the Tokyo 2020 Olympics. According to the nursing home, Kane Tankata made this decision over pandemic anxiety. The Guinness World Record holder was slated to be one of the relay participants in the Fukuoka in southern Japan. Some celebrities who were due to take part have withdrawn due to safety reasons. The Olympic torch relay, which kicked off in March, has been hit by a coronavirus outbreak. Olympic organizers say 6 people who took part in the event tested positive, bringing the total number of cases to 8. Japan declared a state of emergency last month for the urban centers to curb the resurgence of the infections. It's now time to take a look at the weather updates from around the world. For the latest news updates, you can follow us on our social media at Indus.News.